Yada Nablu Yalaka Karendi Kandanunga Warapringa. So let's just welcome you to the land of the red kangaroo, and we're here based at the Windy River at Warapringa at Bedford Park in Adelaide. Yeah, Melissa's asked me to talk about a few things, and really it was about water management and an Aboriginal point of view. What I wanted to do was really just share you a little bit about me and my family's history, and then the way we sort of view the world, and then sort of some of the things that we are doing here on Ghana country to sort of improve water quality and water management across our country. So firstly, Ghana reaches from Cape Jervis down by Kangaroo Island all the way up to Crystal Brook. We're bound by the Mount Lofty Ranges or Urabella, and then by the sea, Yetaberta. So well, basically, I wanted to go over a few things with you guys and just give you my perspective. And I guess some of it's going to be a little bit harsh, but also really important to sort of gather and get an understanding of what that looks like. So for starters, the history, me and Mum started a tourism business probably about in the 1820s. No, 1820s, that's way off. That sounds great, doesn't it? Back in 2019 and 2018, late 2018 and early 2019, and just off the back of being a national manager at Red Cross, I sort of had enough of working not just with government but also working with NGOs around community engagement. So I went out myself and started a tourism business with Mum, and then also an Aboriginal engagement component to it. So today we specialise. We do a lot of cultural engagement, teaching kids about country and caring for country. We talk about the importance of species and animal relationships. We talk about some of the dreaming stories that are associated between land and water, and really some of those important elements that have been there for thousands of years. And that's where we sort of get to the point that, yeah, it's a nice reminder that Aboriginal people have been on this country for a long time. Our ancestors have looked and cared for this country for thousands and thousands of years. So if you were to have an A4 piece of paper and you were to put the tiniest dot you could probably get on the A4, that's the contribution that we've seen in the last 200 years from non-Aboriginal people. So before that, we've been caring for country and having a unique and significant special relationship with country. And it's really important to sort of grasp that time frame. And even like here in South Australia, like if we think about it, the first settlers came here on this country in 1836. Now, do you think they would have, stopped their boats and said, oh yeah, this is a fantastic place if there was rubbish and black water running, out from their rivers and there was rubbish lying all over the beaches? They would probably turn their boats around and head back to another country that they can conquer and destroy. So, we've looked after this place and we've maintained a really unique and special relationship with country from day dot, from the dawn of time. And Aboriginal people have this special relationship that can't be denied. And, even today, it's really difficult to sort of even have this sort of conversation that we're talking about and how we better collectively care for country. I think that's because of the level of trust that's been missed and the opportunities that have dwindled away over the years, where we've sort of expected some sort of relationship. And particularly here in South Australia in 1836, where they started, within that same year, there was a letter sent from the king, insisting, it's called the letters patent, insisting that we have a treaty. And right back then, that was ignored. That treaty opportunity was ignored. That same letter was sent to Canada, half of America, a number of other countries, and New Zealand. And, they were able to recognise that letter and work with traditional owners on caring for country, but not here in South Australia. So it's really disappointing, and the level of trust is sort of missed. So where was I going? I was going back to sort of the history of Aboriginal people and caring for country. And one of the, I think, the most important and unique things is to think that you can't, even if that dot of destruction that we've seen in the last 200 years, where we've seen non-Aboriginal people basically, let's be honest, and I got to be frank, piss, shit, and vomit in every corner of this country. Our storm water management is shocking. The invasive species that impact on our rivers and land is disgusting. And the way we even manage country is terrible. And so I find it really tough to sort of talk about this because, as a tour operator, we get quite engaged and quite excited about country and what does that look like and feel like. Again, what I'm trying to say is that you can't even blame Aboriginal people for this devastation and destruction of country. Especially in South Australia from 1836 to probably 1846, within the first decade, most of Aboriginal people were rounded up by gunpoint and put in concentration camps. And by 1850, nearly every Aboriginal community was rounded up and rallied into these concentration camps. So today, when we come off of country after the referendum, the 1979 or 1970, I think it's 1979 referendum, Aboriginal people, they come back to country and all they see is this invasive species. Our rivers are black, half the animals have disappeared, or maybe even 3/4 of the animal species have disappeared, and it's hard to tell and talk about country and the dreaming stories that once was when you see such devastation. And we're based here at Warraparinga, and that's on basically the bottom of the foothills of the Sturt Creek, Warrapari, and that river runs through this property that we're on, at the cultural centre, as a normal river should. But then, as soon as you hit Sturt Road, I think I have some images. So there's Sturt River from Sturt Road, or the Warrapari. Now this drain runs for 36 k's, 36 k's through the CBD or through the metropolitan of Adelaide. Now, you might think, okay, 36 k's, but you can see that we've got a buffer here, but then the buffer is just all concrete. So when Aboriginal people come back to country and you see 36 k's of concrete, and you have local councils tell you that, oh yeah, we've got a river management plan for the Sturt River or the Warrapari, you sort of get a little upset and you get a little angst, and you rally back and say, yeah, well, are you restoring that, and how you're restoring it, and what's the best method of restoring this, and then they go, well, it's a stormwater management, solution. We can't do anything, and it's going to cost too much money. And then you start to get the shits right up. So from an Aboriginal point of view, this is one example of really poor thought on protecting country. And what I say that is because the river is like my brother, is like the red gum tree in the dreaming stories. They're like my brother and sister, and they are the same as me. They are an entity. They are a relation that we need to care for, and we take real strong feelings around caring for country and caring for rivers and creeks, and we get quite fired up. And our very first, like my mum and her age group, when they were allowed off those missions and come back to country, they saw these sort of rivers and thought to themselves, well, what the shit, how do we? And you can't blame them. I can't blame not one of my ancestors for being mad about what's happened. And it's just the way we manage it today, and the way we can convince others like yourselves who are already in the game that we got to do better. We got to do way better, and we got to do it not just for yourself and not just for me or my kids. Like, stuff that. Let's do it for generations to come. Let's think about how Aboriginal people cared for country so it's there for generations and generations to come. you follow this creek down to Glenelg where it hits the river at Glenelg, and it is black. It is black, and it stinks like poo. And honest to God, I don't care what sort of money you have, but I wouldn't want to be parked at the front of that river line and think to myself, well, oh, well, I've got a beautiful house on top of a river. Well, good luck to that. Anyhow, so let's keep moving on. This is just one example. Another example I want to show you is the Wirrawira Creek. Yeah, so as you can see in this one, right back in 1840, 4 years after they settled in South Australia, they built this beautiful bridge. This is just on Mitchell Road at Goodwood. But as you can see, the creek, Wirrawira Creek, runs on the other side through an orphanage park, and it runs beautifully through the park, and then it hits this road, and then from here on, it's basically a stormwater drain. And to the point that what's embarrassing about this and embarrassing about the plan and the thinking behind it, as you can see, this house is actually structured across that river, that creek. This is my prime example of every cultural awareness training of South Australia's fantastic planning, and how we value country and how we care for country. We've done a couple of jobs now, I guess, as Southern Cultural Immersion for Department of Transport, where they would spend something like a quarter, $250 million on a bridge that would save you 8 seconds of traffic time heading into the city. And then here we are allowing everyone to still piss, shit, and vomit, and build over our creekways and our catchment ways, and how's nature going to grow from this? I've got no idea. So it's super frustrating. We'll keep moving through some of the photos. So this is at the other end, as you can see, down at the bay for Sturt River. Again, it's a really poor, dirty, broad-looking. When you think about it, this should be a #1 project for restoration for the state, and the state is trying to have a relationship with London to be, a greening city. They're working on their plans on how do we better beautify and have more canopy, but then they ignore projects that, are essential to not just what happens upstream at 36 k's from where we are, but what happens down here. Because, I don't think a lot of people in country, in Adelaide and other places, actually recognise their impact in the foothills and how that impacts on the sea and the sea life. So, for example, what you do upstream has huge impacts, and like even today, this dirty water runs into the bay, and then they question, well, how do we get a seagrass colony happening at the foreshore of Glenelg? And you got to be thinking, are you absolutely crazy? Why don't you? Yeah. Anyhow, so I get fully frustrated, I get fully angry, and it's really hard to sort of get my head around it some days. But what I have done, and I think that's interesting, is to start thinking about, well, what does change look like? And what can change mean? And some of those things that I was talking to Melissa previously about was, we really need to look at how we, if we go back to the last image we had, if we go back to thinking about, okay, what is the space needed? So, we put plants in a plant pot and we put them in the ground and we allow enough space for them to expand and grow. And what I'm saying is, if we want nature to grow and we want our country to, flourish and have, corridors and nature corridors and water corridors that really make an impact, we really need to start thinking about, okay, how do we purchase these properties back? how do we set up a fund that looks at buying these places that run over a creek line and think about, well, how can we restore that? And the dreaming story really, like the Karawira Parry dreaming story, is fully about a relationship with the Milky Way and how the red gums and the reeds interact and how all the plant species are associated and that how they all contribute to a community that, you know, is beyond even our realm of understanding today. You know, we really need to start to think about, well, what is the spiritual value and well-being that we get from having these beautiful corridors that could be restored? So what I'm suggesting is the idea of you know, creating a trust or a fund with a collective of broader people to help look at how do we purchase the properties that are on corridors like this today. And you think of the Karawira Parry and others, where there is a number of, you know, 22 councils that run along, you know, the main river of Adelaide, and that each of them don't talk to each other, and each of them, you know, make their own decisions of, you know, how the best to look after the river within their space. And, you know, it's just chaotic, crazy. And I think we all get caught up in this divide and conquer, you know, and we don't realize, you know, what that actually means. But we didn't want to come to this. I didn't want to present without having some sort of idea or a, a brain bubble of, you know, well, what do we do better and how do we do it better and where do we go together? You know, because mum would always say to me, you know, stuff them, send them home, put them on their boat. They've done nothing but treat us, you know, poorly. They've done nothing but destroy our country. How do we? And you know, and me and my kids have always said, well, we can't do that, Nan. We can't do that, Mum. We gotta take their hands and show examples of things that are working. So we're touching base here on the living entity, and that's the other thing is that a couple of years ago, Ghana Native Title Group had a relationship with Greening Adelaide, and we established what we call Wadley Kamunka, which is a working group. That means working together for the objective of making sure that country is beautified. And how do we do that? We realised that New Zealand and other countries around the world and First Nations people had started to legislate their rivers and started to say, well, hang on, this is a person, this is a being, this is a spiritual sense of belonging that's connected to me and connected to us. Like nearly every corner of the globe, most traditional owners will tell you that their riverways are significant, sacred, and special. But here we are in Adelaide, like basically pissing, shitting, and vomiting in it because we got no sense of value. We got no understanding of the spiritual connection that and the importance of what that means. So how do we get that back? So what we did was we worked with Adelaide City Council, not Adelaide City Council, Adelaide University, and we started drafting what we thought was some papers around how do we do this better. And we took some models from New Zealand, and we took basically the model that was just recently done in the last 5 years with the Yarra in Melbourne, and how the traditional owners have recognised the river as a living entity. And we wanted the same with the Karawira Parry. But it's just not the Karawira Parry, it's all the rivers. It's Little Para, it's the Sturt, it's the Onkapringa River, it's, you know, Field River, all these rivers that run through Ghana country. We wanted to people to recognise that they are a living entity, that they are my brother and sisters, and they are your brother and sister, and that we all contribute to this space, and how do we protect and preserve it. So that's the living entity. We really want you to have a go at encouraging you to, you know, think about what that is and, you know, chuck in some words and tell us what your thoughts are. The second one was, if you want to jump to the next QR code. Oh, I said to Melissa, you know, really, we're not thinking hard enough about protecting country. It's okay to go test the waters and then tell yourself, okay, it's black because we've all been shitting in it. And then, but how do we better maintain and look after these corridors and these water courses associated to these corridors? like we've seen some examples in Adelaide of the Wirrapurri or the Sturt River or Willa Willa, or what they call Brown Hill Creek. They're just concrete drains that just collect all the poo and crap from everyone's house and then just chuck it down into the ocean. And if you look up that on a Google map yourself, you'll see that those rivers are concreted and that they are been redesigned just to carry water to the ocean without any sort of restoration. So what we wanted to do is look at other examples, and we took our rainforest rescue model in Queensland and thought about, well, this is Ghana I'm talking about, and thought about, well, what does that mean? And we wanted to definitely encourage you guys to start to think about, okay, well, if we were to establish a watercourse restoration fund, or similar to what they've done with the rainforest rescue, where they purchase lands on these corridors. So we map these corridors and then we purchase land. And then what we could do is we can contribute to that space. So I wanted to put this one up as well to sort of get you an idea of, okay, well, what does that mean, and how do we start to work together on making a difference, and even maybe looking at working with Catherine and the team to establish the core crux of that trust or that fund, and then how do we start to get schools and others and contributions and councils to start thinking about, well, maybe we can contribute by purchasing properties that come available. And I say that because, again, we've done some work with the DIT, which is the Department of Transport, and they purchase properties for roadways, and again, saving us seconds to get to work, which is very important, but it also, we need to think about, well, how do we do that better for our corridors and greenway spaces?
You can see, Corey, the words coming up, like lots of biodiversity, health, natural, habitat restoration, some really great stuff coming through.
Yeah, restoring flows and, slowing down water ways, so then that floods back into, the aqua systems. These are the sort of things. So again, just even think of, like, for example, they're putting, a multi-million-dollar desalination plant in Port Lincoln, because in the next 6 months, Port Lincoln town in South Australia will run out of water, you know, within the next 12 months or so, because they've used all their aquifer. So it's sort of, where do we get to, and how do we start to reshape country and place for all of us to enjoy, and for future generations, like grandkids that you'll never see.
So Corey, really thank you for all your
No
heartfelt
worries.
comments on this, and I think hopefully you've really set the scene and provoked, if we weren't all determined up to this point to do better, I hope we've all been inspired to look to your history and your connection, and understand that it's so important that we all do whatever we can in our roles to create these living streams and protect them. So what we're going to do, Corey, is we're going to revisit the living entity commentary. Catherine's going to collate that in the background, and we're going to present some of that back when we get to the panel. So
Fantastic. All right, thank you.